Hello everyone, MarshW13 here with another hotel review, but this is not just any hotel because this week we find ourselves at the TWA Hotel in New York on the grounds of JFK Airport in Queens. It's connected to Terminal 5, but the rooms and the entire structure are housed in the former Gateway Terminal of Trans World Airlines TWA, which was bustling in its heyday from the 1960s through the early 90s when it went bankrupt. But we booked ourselves in I believe it's a King Executive Suite with a runway view. So let's check out the room. And I guess we'll start with a brief overview. When you first walk in the room, immediately to your right is a closet. Then there is what is a very modern looking and well appointed bar area. To your left is a bathroom which looks large in proportion to the rest of the room, but we'll explore that in a moment. And this is a suite, so although there are not technically separate rooms, there is a living area in addition to a sleeping area, which is dominated by what must be a 50 to 60 inch Samsung television. But what you're paying for here is unquestionably the view. And as I mentioned, we are on the grounds of JFK Airport. We're not just near JFK Airport. We are in a former terminal which is directly connected via an above ground walkway to Terminal 5, which is just across the street, so to speak, here. And that is the sort of operational headquarters for JetBlue. And I don't know much about the rest of the airport, but clearly what you're looking at here is some sort of Delta terminal shared by other SkyTeam carriers like Virgin Atlantic, in which Delta is a near majority stakeholder, as well as Air France. And I believe you also see facing us an Emirates A380, and behind it a Singapore Airlines that looks like a 777-300, and then beyond that is an El Al aircraft, but I can't see it very well, but obviously a jumbo jet that probably shuttles passengers between New York and Tel Aviv. As I said, I need to better orient myself to be able to provide more information concerning which runways and taxiways we're facing here at the moment. But as you can see, this is a very busy time of day here at JFK. This is a time when a lot of aircraft bound for Europe tend to depart. And of course, as you can see, there are a lot of smaller aircraft who shuttle passengers to and from JFK as a connection point. And this is indeed a panoramic view, if you will. You have these huge floor-to-ceiling windows that stretch, well, there are 5 panes of them, all the way from the living room area to the bedroom, if you will. And so you can go to sleep at night with views of night-lit operations at perhaps the busiest international airport in the world. But as this Air France 777 takes off in front of us, let's take a deeper dive into this room, which is unique, I think, for reasons aside from the incredible view. And perhaps we can start with the bed. Now, New York City hotel rooms are notoriously small and cramped and tend to economize space, but I'm not sure that's necessarily evident here in the bedroom area. You do often find, and if you've seen any of my other hotel reviews from New York City, often you'll have very small rooms that are dominated by huge beds, and in this case we have a king bed. and almost preposterously large television sets that, because of the size of the room, are necessarily mounted very close to the bed. And that's actually the case in this room, but as you can see, this room actually has quite a bit of space. But what can we say about the bed aside from its size and the size of the adjoining television set? Well, actually, it is quite firm. This is probably the firmest mattress I've felt in maybe the last, I'll say, 20 hotel rooms in which I've stayed in various cities across the country and the world. For many of you who have specific conditions, maybe back problems, maybe that's precisely what you want. The pillows actually look relatively small. They are very plush compared to other pillows. They sort of just melt or disintegrate in your hand, so that is in contrast to the relatively hard mattress. Kind of interesting. The bedding itself, I can't really comment on. It doesn't feel like extremely high thread count, which is fine. It just feels relatively standard, but I wouldn't say that it feels cheap necessarily. Now, from what I understand, a lot of patrons of this establishment, this entire hotel, are just sort of passing through. Either they're connecting and they enjoy sort of public access to the hotel, or, as I understand it, there are also options to rent day rooms for non-overnight stays. Of course, I'm staying 3 nights, but I guess my point is that not everyone requires a full night's rest in these rooms, and they may be using them for other more diverse purposes. Now, above the headboard, if you will, we have 3 vintage-looking posters. These are obviously reproductions, but they're really beautiful. One is for Las Vegas, one's for Egypt, and one is for Paris. These look like they're from the 60s or 70s, and they're a great addition and consistent with the theme of the hotel. You have these nice TW red colored lampshades that give off a fair amount of light, along with sort of backlit headboard here. Not sure how much reading light that would provide you at night, but again, we're mostly here for the view. And speaking of views, how would you like this to be your office for a couple of days? I don't see a lot of outlets or really ergonomic or work-oriented details here. But what you do have is an obnoxious number of pencils, and they're actually pre-sharpened, and they have the TWA logo. I'm sure almost everyone swipes a couple of those. And you have a rotary dial telephone. You can dial 0 for the front desk, 1 for an outside line, or 7 plus a room number to call a room. Let's see if we have a dial tone. Yes, we do. Let's see if you can hear it. A dial tone is something you don't often hear at all, much less in conjunction with a rotary dial phone, which most people don't even know how to use these days. And again, I think from what we've seen thus far, I see more form than function, and that is probably consistent in this light fixture here. But again, I have no particular complaints. Now, the living room is really beautiful, and the furnishings are, particularly the couch and the chair with ottoman over there, are quite consistent with the 1960s era theming. And I'm not sure if these were designed by Eero Saarinen who was the architect of this building. But again, the theming is quite consistent, and I would say this floor lamp is both utilitarian and stylish with its multiple bulbs and angles. The couch is less plush than I thought it would be, but again, that's probably consistent with the theme. You have these wood frame chairs with the leather cushions and the coffee table here, all set above a rug, which I think is very 1960s. Now, one of the things you won't find in this room is an abundance of storage space. We have this little, almost looks like a mobile small chest here, in that it appears to have a wheel here. It's almost like a concession cart or something. But it does have a little bit of storage space here, and it also sort of doubles as a magazine rack. And these look, I don't think these are facsimiles. These are the original deal, the genuine article. They are Life magazine issues from 1960 and 1961. Another thing you won't find here, aside from an abundance of storage space, is trash cans. Now that is honestly a bit of a head scratcher from my perspective, in that I find that just a bit too cute. I think there's actually plenty of room here, if you look around, for at least a relatively small trash can. But in lieu of that, you have these mats that say, "Thanks for helping us be the greenest building in New York City," and you place certain recyclable materials, which are pictured there on the mat on the left, and then non-recyclables on the right. And then in the drawer beneath, there is a safe. This looks like the remnants of a minibar, and from the feel of it and the looks of it, it does appear to still be cooling. And so I'm assuming guests can place their own food and beverage in this little, what at first glance looks more like a wine fridge. And then I'll be honest with you, as I mentioned earlier, New York hotels, and this one appears to be no different, tend to pride themselves in the economy, in the, let's say, economic usage of space. But as you can see, there is a lot of unused space here. This is a bar, which I doubt many people would use or entertain in this room, but you have a couple of bar stools. There's no wet element to this bar, no wet bar, but you have what I assume are 3 martini glasses, 4 sort of standard wine glasses, and 2 smaller glasses, or you could call them stemless wine glasses, and then some additional wine glasses. Love the coasters there. I imagine we'll be swiping those ourselves. And kind of an interesting looking etched glass ice bucket. And when I first entered the room, I just assumed there was no closet space, because what looked like a wardrobe did not seem accessible. I pulled really, really hard here, and I couldn't open it, so I just kind of wrote it off as maybe a maid's closet or something like that. But again, it would be quite a waste of space if that were the case. Finally, I was able to get it open. Now it opens quite easily. And as you can see, this is a fairly decent sized closet. I was able to fit a huge checked luggage size suitcase, and there's room for plenty of clothes, no fewer than 12 hangers. But one thing you won't find here is an ironing board, iron, or any other things you might find in other standard hotel closets. And I guess that leaves us with the bathroom, which frankly is the part of the room that surprised me the most because it looks really, really large because it's simply long and deep. And the reality is it does have a huge amount of counter space here, devoted to only 2 basins. And again, although there's an economic use of space, there's some paradoxical apparent waste of space as well. But what you do get here is what appears to be a sufficient number of towels for 2 people. And there's no tub, but you have a fairly large shower. Again, particularly for New York City. I mean, we're not in Manhattan, we're in Queens. And instead of bath amenities that guests typically take with them here, we have the dispenser system that you see more often in European hotels. I also want to point out that although my personal preference would be to enjoy this view 24/7, if you prefer some privacy or wish to shield your eyes from the light, and you don't want to view multiple Emirates A380s on the tarmac, you can engage these blackout curtains with a simple button press over here. I'm going to press the down arrow, and there you go. That should cover the entire room. And you can stop this process, I believe, at any time. There you go. But they should go all the way down. So what conclusions can we draw from this brief initial tour and first impressions? Well, what I can say is that the executive suite has a sufficient amount of square footage so as to dwarf many other New York City area hotel rooms and even other airport hotels, at least in my experience. And although it's not the cheapest one-night stay in the entire world, it's not bad for New York City. You're not necessarily in the heart of Queens location-wise, so if you did want to do things in the city, I think, for instance, an Uber ride from here to the Flushing Corona Park, for instance, would be $30, $40, $50 or something like that. As we see a Lufthansa A340 taking off just before us, likely en route to Frankfurt or München. But when you consider the fact that, particularly for aviation buffs, you have this amazing unobstructed view of unprecedentedly unobstructed view of operations at the world's most interesting, I think I said busiest earlier, but interesting and probably most numerous in terms of international departures or transcontinental departures in the world. And you layer all of the additional aviation and historical related attractions and theming on top of it. I think this would be a bucket list item for any av geek, even if you spend but a fleeting night here. So my initial impression is that I predict this will be quite a memorable stay and that I will not regret spending multiple nights at this hotel, although, as I said earlier, most patrons spend no more than one night, and some spend less than one night here and enjoy perhaps the day rental services available. So if that may be applicable to you, that's also an option and perhaps something to investigate further. But with that, as always, thank you for joining me on this review, and stay tuned for my next one. Until then, happy and safe travels. Marsh W13 out.